Okay, we are going to fill in your guided notes so that you can study for your exam. So you should have your packet in front of you, and I will be verbally walking you through this, but all of the information that you see on the screen in front of you should also be able to provide the information that you need to fill out your packet. So um, on page 1, you have the elements of art at the top, and the information you see here can be filled or can be used to fill out the section at the top where it says what are the elements of art. So the elements are the components in a work of art that can be isolated and defined, and you have a section right at the top that says they are the components or parts of a work of art that can be, and you have a blank space, so you would want to write in there, be isolated and defined. You have a second section that says they are the tools used, and then you have a blank space, and you would want to write tools used to create a work of art. And every work has, you have a blank space, and you would want to write uses at least one element of art. So that would be how you want to fill out this packet. They are guided notes, meaning you don't need to write every word verbatim that I've given you parts of the sections, and you simply need to fill them in. So while you're filling those parts in, I will explain what some of these definitions mean. So, elements of art, they are components that can be isolated and defined. That simply means that, like in this painting here by Edward Munch, we can isolate. We can say, hey, I see the color orange, I see the color blue, or I see a diagonal line. So I can point them out, and I can define those things. I can define what a diagonal line is. I can define what a curvy line is. I can define what the color orange is. So they're literally things I can point out and give a definition to. It says they're the tools we use in creating a work of art. They're literally things that we use to create a work of art. So I use colors, I use shapes, I use lines. And that every work of art in the world uses at least one element of art. So we use colors, we use lines, we use shapes. We have to use something to create a work of art. They all have at least one. Most have several. So in the second section there, you have to list the elements of art. So there are 7: line, color, shape, form, space, value, and texture. You might have an art teacher who combines value and color together because they basically relate to the same thing. But in our class, we are going to separate them out. So you want to write those in your blank spots underneath where it says the elements of art are. And I'm going to let you fill those out. So if you need to hit pause here, feel free. And I suggest that you read through here to understand why we care about these things for the elements of art. And if you hear my dog in the background, he is making sure we are safe here. So feel free to hit pause and fill the rest of this out. I'm going to move on to line. Okay, line. Line is the most basic element of art. It is simply a mark that is greater in length than width. Okay, so it has to be longer than it is wide. And line can vary in how long it is, how wide it is, and what direction it's going in. So you have 3 blanks. Lines can vary in length, width, and direction. Now we have a second slide here to fill in the rest of the information on this page. So I'm going to go on to that. Feel free to hit pause here if you need to fill in your information. And in your bottom section here, you have 5 boxes, and then you have underneath some information you need to fill in. So in the first box, you are going to put in some curved lines. So simply draw some curvy lines in there. You can make them thinner or thicker or shorter or longer, however you want to do it. And underneath there, it says type of line, and I've already filled in for you curvy. And then it says effects. So you can choose to write down 3 of these effects, or you can add more lines underneath if you want to add even more, but I'm just requiring that you write down 3 effects. So curved lines. Some of the positive effects of curved lines, they can give a sense of softness or youthfulness or gracefulness, elegance, movement, rhythm to a work of art. So if you want something to look like there is movement happening, or a sense of elegance to your work of art, using curved lines is a good trick to use. And I'm using the words positive and negative, not in like, oh, that's a better painting or that's a worse drawing. It's just more of a usually we think of these things as more positive or negative, but sometimes you want negative effects. Sometimes you want your painting to feel more disturbing, or your drawing to feel more like disturbing to your viewer, and that would be a good thing then. So if you want that to happen, using a lot of curved lines can give you that effect. Something being too stereotypically feminine can be seen as being negative, but that could be the effect you want it to have, and that could be a very good thing then for your picture that you're creating. Same thing with being too decorative. That could be the goal that you want to have. And then on the flip side, if you don't want it to be too decorative or too feminine or disturbing, then you want to just be careful about those things. Okay, so under effects, you can choose 3 of those or more, feel free. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next one. So in your second box, draw some horizontal lines. Horizontal lines go straight across. And you can see here in this seascape that we have a horizon line. But we also have horizontal lines that make up this sea. It's a pretty, tranquil sea. And horizontal lines give effects of stability. They're very grounded, they're tranquil, it's relaxing. Horizontal lines are going to be something that makes you feel very grounded. Negative effects of horizontal lines that can become boring or uninteresting. It can feel really stale, not exciting. So if you want a painting to feel really like relaxing and calming, horizontal lines are great. If you want it to look exciting and interesting, you might not want a ton of horizontal lines. So horizontal lines in your box, you want to draw some. Make sure you write which type of line it is and then write your effects. All right, your third type of line. Vertical lines. So we have these really strong vertical columns here going up in the Basilica de la Sagrada Familia, which is an amazing cathedral if you ever get a chance to go see it. It's a fantastic one. Positive effects of vertical lines give a sense of strength, security, inspires awe, dignity. Using long vertical lines can visually increase height, makes things actually appear like there's greater height to it. So cathedrals and government buildings and really important spaces often use these really strong vertical lines to make it feel like the ceilings are actually higher than they actually are. You can use that in drawings and paintings as well to make things look like they're taller. Negative effects. Too many vertical lines can make people feel uneasy or claustrophobic. It can also make people feel insignificant. Kind of another trick why really important buildings use a lot of vertical lines too. Make people that walk in there feel not quite as important. So fill in your boxes with this. Feel free to hit pause if you need to. Diagonal lines. So draw some diagonal lines in your box. Positive effects of diagonal lines. Get a sense of movement, energy, action. They're interesting and eye-catching. So here we have these diagonal lines made up of her arms. She has a different diagonal going on with her forearm here, even her hands at a different diagonal, her leg, her foot, lots of diagonals happening here. Even with the setup of the picture, everything is kind of at a diagonal. Even the way her dress, these little kind of painted lines in here, they're all kind of at diagonal lines. Negative effects of diagonal lines. It can be overwhelming, it can be overstimulating, it can be tiring to look at. So you want to be careful, but they're a really good way if you want to show action or movement in a picture, if you're trying to show horses racing or an action scene of cars or a war or anything like that. Diagonal lines are a really good trick to use. And the last one, zigzag lines, which are basically multiple diagonal lines, right? They're going to be even more of the same effect. So they're really energetic, they're lively. Action and movement again, but they're more intense than diagonal lines. And then they're going to have the same and negative effects, but even more so. So they're chaotic. You can get a sense of being distraught or agitated. And then in Bridget Riley's painting here, that movement is really intense. You kind of have this spiral effect going down. So put some zigzag lines in your last little box there and add your details. And then we will go on to page 2 in your guided notes. And we have shape. So shape and form are together in your notes, and that's simply because they have a lot of similarities, but we're going to start with shape first. So shape is a two-dimensional enclosed space, so the shape has to close, otherwise it's just a line, and it's two-dimensional, so only has two dimensions. You can only measure length and width, so those are your two dimensions. And they have two different categories. They are either geometric or they're organic. So on the left-hand side, you have geometric shapes. They're shapes that usually have names like an oval, a circle, a triangle, a square, a rectangle, a trapezoid, etc. And organic shapes, you can describe them, but they usually don't have like names per se, and they don't have rules. So you could be like, it looks like a cloud, it looks like a pear, it looks like an amoeba. But we could draw them lots of different ways, and they don't have the same sort of rules that geometric shapes have. So in your pictures, you could draw on one side of the two boxes you could draw geometric shapes and organic shapes on one side, and I would leave a little space though, because you're going to have forms here in a second, because you could do both in there. But you can kind of pick if you just want to draw shapes in there as well, because forms, you'll learn here in a second, are three-dimensional. So they have an additional dimension that you can measure. So you have length and width, but you also have depth because they're 3D. So we're talking about things like sculptures and things that are like architecture, like we see here in the picture. And this is the Weizmann Art Museum in Minneapolis. It's a cool building if you've never been there. And they are also geometric or organic. So you have things like geometric form, like a cube would be a geometric form, because a square, when it's 3D, is a cube. But you can also have organic shapes that are, not following those same rules, that are much more kind of nature-like rather than a rectangular prism or a cube or a sphere or a having those specific names. They don't have to be super precise like that. A tree would be an organic form. But the difference between shape and form is shapes are two-dimensional and forms are 3D, and they both can be geometric or organic. And then in your boxes that you can draw your little pictures in, draw some geometric shapes and forms, draw some organic shapes and forms, and that should be it for just shape and form. They're pretty easy. And then we'll go on to space here. All right, now space is interesting because it has two totally different definitions. So they don't have anything to do with each other, so we're going to treat it two different ways. So this first one is pretty easy. Space is referring to the depth or distance a viewer perceives in a work of art. So literally, the Taj Mahal here, all right, looks like it's farther away. So feeling of depth or distance, all right? And this is a drawing, so it's on a flat surface, and it's being able to draw or paint or create something that looks like it's farther away, even though it's on a flat surface and we know it's not farther away. Actually, it's the same distance. So this is a use of space that is basically like an optical illusion. Okay, so that's simple definition. And in your box that you are drawing there, you can draw a picture that has some sort of depth or distance, and you can do that either by drawing something higher up in the box, because that's one way to make something look like it's farther away, or you could use overlapping, or you can make something bigger lower in the box and something smaller higher up in the box, because that is also a way to make something look like it's closer and farther away. So if you look at these little like kind of cypress bushes here, this one right here is bigger, and they get smaller as they get farther away. So you can see that that's one way. And you can also tell that this one is lower on the page, and see the bottom of it, I keep triggering that. So the bottom of this one here is way down here, and the bottom of this one here is higher on the page. So you can see that that changes, and it makes it look like it's farther away. There's lots of different ways you can do it. So on your picture, just draw anything that makes it feel like something is closer and something is farther away. Just a simple reminder for yourself. Okay, your second way is totally different. So we're talking about positive and negative space, and we're just going to keep it really simple for 7th grade. So you want to know positive space as where your shapes and forms exist. Okay, so this is what we usually call like the subject of your piece. So if you're thinking of like the painting like the Mona Lisa, she's your subject, she's your positive space, okay? And your negative space is the shapes around your object. So it's usually called the background. And these examples here we usually talk about in class, but I actually don't want to confuse you on this because this is a little bit more advanced. So let's just keep it simple. Positive space is your subject. Negative space is your background. So if you're drawing your little pictures on your page, I would draw two simple shapes, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase it. I would draw the same shape twice. So do something like a heart or a circle or a square or a diamond. And in one, color in the positive space, just with your pencil. And I would write underneath there, positive space. And in the other one, color in the background. And just to remind yourself which thing you're talking about. Or draw a simple picture of a person and point to the person as your positive space as a reminder, and draw your person again and point to the background of the other one and remind yourself that that's the negative space. Something that will give you a reminder of positive space is your subject, negative space is your background. Okay, or we could look at this one. He is your positive space, and all this empty space around him is your negative space. And reading this would probably give you a much better idea of why we care about positive and negative space, because it can really play a big impact on your works of art. Okay, I'm going to move on. You can pause it here and read that. Okay, page 3 is texture. Okay, texture refers to the surface quality or feel of an object, literally how it feels. Is it rough, smooth, soft, etc. There's two different types. Actual texture, like literally real, you can touch it with your fingertips. We also call that tactile. And then we have implied texture. It's suggested by the way an artist has created the work of art, so it's visual. So all of our drawings that we do, or paintings, if it looks like it has texture, but we know if we touched it, it would be like the paper or the canvas. It wouldn't actually feel fuzzy or rough or smooth or furry. That is implied. But if we did a sculpture and we actually covered it with like fur or spikes or anything like that, and we touched it with our fingers, we are like, oh my gosh, it actually feels furry or rough or smooth or whatever. That is actual. So one is one that we can actually touch with our fingertips. One is one that we only see with our eyes. So actual is with touch. Implied is just with our eyes. If we touched it, it wouldn't actually feel that way. So this is a painting right here by Chuck Close. It looks super realistic. It looks like he would actually have a fuzzy beard and his hair would be soft, but it would not. It's just a canvas. It would be not feeling that way at all. This is a sculpture. If we touched it, it's made out of metal, but his beard is so perfectly like sculpted, it would feel bumpy. His hair is so perfectly sculpted, you would be able to feel those changes. The ridges of his ear, the folds in his bandana, all those things we'd be able to feel with our actual fingertips. Okay. For your examples there, usually I cut out pieces of actual like fabric or something and glue them on for actual texture. Since you're doing this on your own, if you have something to glue there, fantastic. Otherwise, you might just have to write down something like, this would be real texture. And then for the other one, you can just draw some implied texture, like draw some fur, draw some scales, or draw something that would give you implied texture. Okay, now for color, this is the big one. All right, so it skips to the bottom first. So value comes first, and value is the lightness or darkness of a color, and it is its own element of art. And we're simply talking about lights and darks. All right, so pink has value. All right, so light pink is one of the values of red, and it gets all the way up to a really, really dark pink or a dark red. All right, so lightness or darkness of a color. is simply, is it lights or darks of one color? So the value of red can go from baby, baby, baby pink all the way to blood red, and that would be talking about the value of red, okay? Color itself is simply, the definition of it is when light strikes an object and reflects back in your eyes, because light travels in wavelengths and in particles, but the wavelength determines what color we see. So the very scientifically, the length of a wave determines what color we see. We see a certain like spectrum of light, and other animals can see more colors than we can, which is kind of cool, or they can see less colors than we can, which is kind of cool too. And it's just kind of fascinating that we see colors based on like different spectrums of light. It's fascinating. All right, hue is a word we just should know as good 21st century learners, and it's simply another name for color. So if I say, what hue is your shirt, I'm asking what color is your shirt. Just a fancy word for color. Okay, intensity is a word we use in art, and it simply is talking about the strength of a color or how pure the color is. So is it like a really intense red, or is it like not so much? Is it a dull kind of matte red? And we just talk about intensity as like the strength of a color. Okay, just some basic color vocab there. All right, moving on. Oh, we'll skip that. Just some examples of value, some lights and darks. Lights and darks, lights and darks. More examples of value, that's just in color. All right, so we're gonna go to the color wheel, and the color wheel is kind of fun. So the color wheel is a visual tool that aids in two different things. It helps us mix colors. So if I want to know how to make orange, I can actually use the color wheel, and I'll be like, oh, hey, here's orange. Orange is between the color red and between the color yellow. Oh, okay, so I mix red and yellow to make orange. Oh, that's cool. And it also helps us create color schemes. And color schemes basically are color families or color like combos that I know look good together. And we'll study a few of those in a minute here. So it helps us mix colors and create color schemes. And a fun fact for you is that the color wheel was invented in 1666 by Sir Isaac Newton. Just something to know in life, because that's a good thing to know. All right. On page 4 of your notes, there is the last thing from this slide, and something really important to know because you're going to need to use it on the test. So the colors have a fixed location on the color wheel, and that simply means that they have a space on the color wheel where they have to be in the correct order. So red is always going to be next to orange. Okay, and red's always going to be next to purple because it has to be there to be used properly, because orange has to be between red and yellow to make sure that we know how to mix colors. However, red does not have to be at the top of the color wheel. Red could be at the bottom of the color wheel. It's a wheel, it can turn. So don't feel like if you see a color wheel where red is like over on the right hand side that it's wrong. It just has to be in the right order of the colors. So this thing could go in a circle, like I could spin this as long as I don't change which order the colors go in. Hopefully that makes sense. So like these 12 little slices here need to always go in the specific order, but I could like throw this to you like a frisbee, and if you threw it back to me and I ended up putting it back up on the screen here and I didn't put it up the same way, that would be fine because the colors would still be in the same order. So again, I hope that makes sense, but they have a like specific order they have to be in, but it doesn't have to go, like red doesn't have to be at the top, green doesn't have to be here at the bottom, as long as red is always going to be next to this red-orange, and orange is next to regular orange. They just have to go in that specific order. And we'll write those down in a minute. So here we go. But first, some basics. So some basic color schemes. We have primary colors. Hopefully you learned this in elementary school. They are red, yellow, and blue. The special things about primary colors are you can use these colors to mix all other hues on the color wheel. So We can mix red, yellow, and blue to make our purples and our oranges and our greens, and then all of those in between. So that's kind of fun. And then the other thing about it is that you can't make the primary colors by mixing anything else. So we have to start with them. So primary means first, you have to start with them, and you can use them to mix everything else. Secondary colors are orange, green, and purple, or violet, which is the color or the word we use in the art world. And we get those by mixing two primary colors. So we get purple or violet by mixing red and blue, right? Because purple is between red and blue. We get orange by mixing red and yellow, right? Because orange is between red and yellow. And we get green by mixing yellow and blue, because green is between yellow and blue. So that is how we use the color wheel to mix those colors. And then we have tertiary colors. Tertiary means third, and they're sometimes also called intermediate. And these are achieved by mixing one primary and a secondary color that are next to each other on the color wheel. And you can see they have awesome names like red, orange, red, violet, blue, green, yellow, orange. Very exciting. And you can see that you get these colors by mixing. So we have red, orange right here. And you get it by mixing red and orange. And amazingly, it's between the colors red and orange. And you get yellow, orange by mixing yellow and orange. And it's between yellow and orange. So there's a pattern. Yellow green's between yellow and green. Blue green is between blue and green. Blue violet's between blue and violet. And there's your pattern. And the primary color comes first. The secondary color comes second. And that should help you remember how to list them. And just a hint on your test, you will have to come up with a color wheel in the correct order. So you will want to know your colors. So there's a blank color wheel at the bottom of your page. So you are given a color, I believe it's red, and so next to your red you will want to write like red violet, and then you're going to want to write violet, and then you are going to want to write blue violet, then blue, then blue green, green, yellow, yellow orange, orange, red, orange, and back to red again, and that will be pretty much the same idea of what you're going to want to do on the test. I will give you a color to start with, and you'll have to fill in the rest in the correct order. So just a hint there. Okay, so color schemes. All right, last section of your notes, color schemes. We use these to create style and appeal, meaning you want to have a certain effect. You will probably want to choose a certain color scheme. So some color schemes are soothing, some are eye-catching, some are energetic. So you have different reasons for picking different color schemes. So complementary color schemes, these are opposite of each other on the color wheel. So like red and green are opposites. And they are, they create a very vibrant look. They have high contrast. And there's a reason that we see them in like sports teams' uniforms. We see them like red and green. We see them at Christmas time. We see them in ads a lot of the time because they're super eye-catching. But they have some negative effects as well. So you don't want to use them like in text. So you don't want to make like a really big poster out of them and use the words with complementary colors. You could use like pictures with complementary colors, but don't use words. And you don't really want to use them in super large doses. Like you don't want to have a big bulletin board where you have an equal amount of like red and green. You could have like mostly red and then some green. That would be good, but not equal amounts. That would be annoying to the person that's looking at it. So it has, you want to give some examples. So red and green is one. So if they're opposites, blue and orange would be another. Yellow and violet would be another. And it says they're good for, they stand out, right? They're vibrant, and they have high contrast. I don't know how many examples you guys need in there. I don't see any list of how many you need, but so eye-catching, they're vibrant, they stand out, and they're bad for text, and they are bad for large doses. Okay, so analogous. So big weird word is analogous. These are colors that are next to each other on a color wheel. So like here, they're neighbors. Okay, they usually match well, they are serene, they are comfortable, they look good together, they are harmonious, they're pleasing to the eye, so lots of good effects. You do want enough contrast when you use them, so something that is going to pop out, so you usually want something that is a little bit dominant, but they are just like really pleasing to the eye, so really good for like anything you want to be calming and like considered beautiful. Analogous is a good choice for these. So an example, any 3 to 5 colors in a row. So you could just do yellow, green, blue, or if you want to be really specific, yellow, yellow, green, green, blue, green. You could list those. All of those would be analogous. All right, triadic. Triadic, these are evenly spaced around the color wheel, so like a triangle. So purple or violet, green and orange. You notice those are your secondary colors, but you could also use your tertiary colors instead, right? You can make a triangle out of those. And these are quite vibrant, even if you use pale or unsaturated colors, which means if you use, like, instead of using violet, if you used lavender, and if you used like pale green and you used pale orange, like if you added lots of white to these colors, they would still be vibrant, they'd still stand out, which is kind of unusual. That these would look so vibrant even if you use the pastel versions, which is kind of cool. So they're vibrant even if you're using the pastels or even if you're using the pale colors of those, and they are the ones that are evenly spaced. Okay, monochromatic colors. These are using just one hue or just one color, and you get variation by using the tints and shades. These are unifying and harmonious colors. This color scheme is unifying and harmonious. So you can see here with the tiger, he is only blue, and you get the variation by lights and darks of that blue. Okay, so there's no black in here, or there's black in the blue, but there's no pure black and there's no pure white. It's light, light blue, dark, dark blue, and all the variations in between. And if you didn't know what tint and shade meant, here you go. A tint is any color that has white added to it. A shade is any color that has black added to it. And you don't need to write this down, but a fun fact, if you have gray added to a color, it's called a tone. And just so you are aware, you should always start with your lighter color and add your darker one when you're mixing colors. And we have our last little slide here. And it's warm and cool colors. So you can divide your color wheel into 2 sections of warm and cool. Warm colors are vivid and energetic, and they tend to advance in space, means they tend to pop out. And those are your reds, yellows, and oranges. And your cool colors are calming and they're soothing, and they tend to recede, which means they tend to step back. And those are blues, greens, and violets. And your whites, white, black, grays, and browns are neutral, and they tend to work, well with other colors, and they look good with everything else. And now I have an upset baby, and we're done with the slides, so that's it. All right, have a great day, you guys. Bye.